Welcome to the Global India podcast and another highly relevant episode, Crisis Management a la Kerala. I'm your host, Dr. Lily Padman. I'm delighted to introduce a college mate and friend, Rhoda D'sa, who has graciously agreed to give her perspective on some aspects of the COVID-19 crisis, which we are going to discuss today. Rhoda received her MSc degree in statistics from Mysore University, which she put to good use at the Reserve Bank of India, where she had a brilliant career and a dual role as a statistician and an economist. Thank you, Rhoda, for joining us on this podcast and for sharing your expertise with us.
Lily, thank you for inviting me. Well, nobody, least of all me, can claim expertise in this crisis, which has blindsided all, but we certainly need to deal with it. First, a look at the explosive global spread of the virus when country after country went into lockdown. In the first 3 months of 2020, there were 1 lakh cases. 11 days later, the cases had doubled to 2 lakhs. And just 4 days later, it was 3 lakh cases. Now, this was in March. Since then, the world remains in the grip of the pandemic.
You are absolutely right. Here are the latest statistics from the Microsoft COVID-19 tracker. As of August 23, 2020, the United States, with a population of 331 million people, or roughly 4% of the global population, has had roughly 178,000 COVID deaths, making up 22% of the global number of COVID deaths, while India, with a population of 1,380 million, or 18% of the global population and roughly 4 times the US population, has had 7% of the global number of COVID deaths. Surprisingly, India has done better than the United States, but overall, would you agree that these are pretty grim statistics?
Grim indeed. For the first time in the history of the world, all of humanity has been brought low by a microscopic virus, a parasite 10,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. Every country is facing the same threat, consumed by the same uncertainties. We also know that the impact of COVID-19 and the response has been different in each country.
Yes, some countries are managing the pandemic better than others. As I mentioned earlier, India has done a better job than the United States. One state in India in particular has done a spectacular job in containing the coronavirus. This is the state of Kerala.
How do you compare Kerala's track record with the rest of India and the world at large?
With just 219 COVID deaths, or 0.03% of the global number of COVID deaths out of 35 million people, or roughly 0.5% of the global population, Kerala has the most impressive track record compared to the rest of India and certainly the world at large. Here is my take as to how this was accomplished. I have seen a bottom-up approach in Kerala where the local panchayats have been empowered to make decisions affecting the community they serve. This decentralized approach, along with tremendous leadership and coordination at the state level, has been effective in handling the COVID crisis.
You have identified a crucial factor in the Kerala success story. That is, the government fostered participation and support of the community at the grassroots levels in decision-making and implementation.
Yes, in reality, the Kerala model combines both the bottom-up and top-down approaches in an optimal manner by having the top level of the government set the vision and the direction, while the bottom or grassroots level, namely the local authority along with the community, is given the responsibility for the actual implementation with support and coordination provided by the top level.
Let us look at three important areas where Kerala has successfully intervened: health, food, and education.
In the health arena, the state effectively implemented home quarantine. Here, the elected members of the local governments acted not merely as enforcers, but also as caregivers. Strong messages about giving due care to people in home quarantine and not stigmatizing them could be passed on effectively to the public under the leadership of local governments. A top-down model would have failed here. Besides the leading role assigned to local governance institutions, Kerala could also utilize the services of community volunteers. A state or central government can give broad directions and guidelines, but people's participation under the leadership of empowered local governments is the most effective strategy to contain the spread of the pandemic, along with aggressive testing, isolating, and contact tracing. Kerala has also invested heavily in universal health care, which is paying off in a big way during this pandemic.
Evidently, there are two key elements here: the pre-existing infrastructure and the involvement of local entities. Now let's talk about the food situation in Kerala.
On the food front, community kitchens were set up to ensure no one went hungry during the COVID-19 lockdown. These kitchens were being run by the local panchayats in conjunction with the Kudumbashri project launched by the government of Kerala in 1998 with the aim of empowering women and eradicating poverty through concerted community action under the leadership of local governments.
What the Kerala government has done in the arenas of health and food is truly remarkable. Now about the third and last front, education. What actions were taken by the government?
In addition to the funding provided by the state government, private citizens have donated generously in cash and kind as well. Because of donations I had made to several panchayats as part of their health and food initiatives, I received a call from one of the teachers requesting me to donate TVs to students who did not have TVs in their homes to be able to access the courses that were being offered on cable television. The idea of giving a TV to each student did not appeal to me for two reasons. Firstly, it did not seem to be a cost-effective option. And secondly, how could we guarantee that these students would actually focus on learning and not get distracted by other things on TV? I was in favor of providing TVs to community centers where students could gather in small groups to access online courses. I found out that the state government was in fact urging the local panchayats to set up such learning centers. The panchayats came up with the innovative idea of using existing nursery school centers called Anganwadis as learning centers. I, along with several other donors, enthusiastically donated TVs to these Anganwadis. I have visited quite a few Anganwadis and have been impressed by the way they function, with a teacher and a helper for each Anganwadi and a lot of community support.
That is very interesting. We know that the Anganwadis are rural healthcare centers under the Ministry of Women Development and Child Welfare. I believe there are more than 1 million Anganwadis located in villages across India as a part of the Indian public health system. A typical Anganwadi provides nutrition and basic health care to rural families. Can you tell us how Anganwadis fit into the Kerala model?
In Kerala, these Anganwadis are being utilized as learning centers where students without TVs in their homes can access online courses being provided by the government under the supervision of the Anganwadi teacher, who is not required to teach these students. Apparently, Anganwadis in Karnataka remain closed due to COVID-19. It's probably a good idea to reopen these Anganwadis in a safe way with social distancing and mandatory masks, and to utilize them as learning centers all over India, following the Kerala model.
It sounds like a good idea to utilize Anganwadis as learning centers. They already operate with collaboration between government and the local community. I would suggest that these learning centers should continue even after the pandemic ends.
I agree with you entirely. Even after kids get back to regular school, they can benefit a great deal from these learning centers by way of supplementary education. Kids can really take advantage of the active English package on Tata Sky, mathematics courses offered by the Khan Academy, and all sorts of other courses offered by top universities such as Harvard and Stanford at no cost. The general standard of education can only improve with this type of supplementary education.
It is heartening to see the progress Kerala has made on all three fronts: health, food, and education. A crucial factor in the success story is that a good public infrastructure already existed in Kerala. This was helpful when the government introduced emergency measures to contain the coronavirus outbreak. The Kerala model is something the rest of India and the world at large could emulate. But a word of caution, I must point out that one mold doesn't fit all. The Kerala model will need to be customized to meet the needs of individual states.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rhoda, for a comprehensive look at the Kerala model to see how the rest of India and the rest of the world can benefit from the example set by Kerala.
Thank you, Lily, for the opportunity to participate in the Global India podcast and to focus on the Kerala model for governance, which has been remarkably successful in handling the COVID crisis and is bound to do well in the post-COVID era as well.
We conclude this episode with some music and humor to relieve the stress created by a sense of isolation and uncertainty afflicting our lives during this pandemic. Phrases like social distancing and flattening the curve have become part of our vocabulary. One of the perceptible effects of the quarantine measure, self-imposed or otherwise, is weight gain due to lack of exercise. This has prompted the following joke. You need to practice social distancing to curb the spread of the coronavirus and flatten the curve. But more importantly, you need to practice social distancing from your refrigerator to flatten your own curve.
Lokam muluvan sukham pagaranai snehadipame militurattu.
Lokam muluvan sukham pagaranai snehadipame militurattu.
Lokam muluvan sukham pagaranai snehadipame militurattu.
ലോകം മുഴുവൻ സുഖം പകരാനായി
is a free podcast. However, if you enjoy the podcast to the point where it puts you in a generous mood, you can unleash your generosity by donating to the Lions Club of Bangalore Whitefield. Please check out their website. Please write checks payable to Whitefield Lions Club Services Trust out of your Indian bank accounts and send them to Global India 7612 Fenwick Cove Lane, Orlando, Florida 32819. For more details, please visit our website www.globalindiapodcast.com. Please email your feedback and ideas for future episodes to globalindiapodcast@gmail.com. We would love to showcase your talents and accomplishments as well. All you have to do is to email us a note along with your biodata and a recording of your music. Alvida, adios, au revoir, and goodbye for now.